Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns with an early practice out in training camp today. They have the day off tomorrow due to the players. Martin Emerson's injury was in fact as serious as it appeared yesterday. The Browns put Emerson on the injured list. He tore his Achilles. He will have surgery, but he is out for the year. The Browns also waived wide receiver Michael Woods today with an injury designation. Kevin Stefanski talking about Emerson and how they're going to sort through that cornerback position.
You guys saw the news with MJ yesterday, so that's confirmed via MRI. He'll get surgery. He's out for this season. Disappointed. Obviously, injuries are the worst part about our game, but he will bounce back. I know what he's made of, and I know he's got our support. He's got his teammates' support. So, but with that, I'll take any questions.
Greg obviously steps up, or continues kind of in that base defense as the outside guy, but what's sort of the mix behind him, if you could, just how do you see sort of that group?
I need to work through it. I think that's the thing that we've seen certainly this season. Every season you'll have injuries at positions, and guys have to earn roles, and I think that's what training camp is about, really figuring that out.
Obviously, Cam Mitchell, I would think, would be in that mix. What have you seen from him in his couple of years?
Yeah, Cam's always done a nice job. He's productive when he's out there. I think he's ball aware, very intelligent player.
Yeah, and so now Greg Newsome gets his opportunity. He's in the final year. They picked up the fifth-year option. He was a first-year pick. He's got to go out and have a good year if he wants a second contract with the Browns. Yesterday, we played the sound for you where Jimmy Hasslam, Browns owner, reiterated that Shedeur Sanders was general manager Andrew Berry's pick. Today, Stephen A. Smith reacting to Hasslam, saying that it was Andrew Berry who made the Shedeur Sanders selection.
I've got two train of thoughts. Let me give you my first one. The first one is he could be speaking to the city of Cleveland as if to say, don't blame me for this one. That is the man that gave Deshaun Watson guaranteed $230 million, which right now is going down as arguably the worst trade in NFL history. I mean, the Herschel Walkers of the world with Dallas years ago, and all of Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones shipping them to Minnesota for all the assets they got. We got a couple of things that's up there. This is up there. The way that Deshaun Watson has looked in a Cleveland Browns uniform after all that he endured, clearly it's a disaster. And they tried to set the new market, but folks weren't going with that with Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and others.
We'll hear from Stephen A. a little bit more. We'll talk plenty about the Browns. Veteran offensive tackle Jack Conklin talked about practicing day in and day out against Myles Garrett, as well as going in the extreme heat in pads.
It's great. You want to struggle. The camp is a struggle anyway, but the more struggle you can get, the more, you really don't find out who guys are until it's hard, tough into the game. You're on a long drive and really see how guys mentally are holding up. And to be able to have weather like this and have longer drives, I think that's really what builds the fortitude of a team, and you can really see what guys are made of.
Kevin was talking about how Myles can wreck a practice, like he can wreck a game. And I know yesterday, I think he struggled. DeJuan struggled, and then he came to your side a little bit. What are those conversations like in that room, whether you're talking to DeJuan just about keeping your chin up when it's so hard to block him?
I think the biggest thing you do is you got to look at it from a positive manner. I mean, he's a great player, but you got to rise to the occasion. You got to when you know he's over there, you got to be a little just more locked in, a little more harder push off because you know how fast he's going to come. And frankly, to have that every day in practice is only going to make you a better player. And I'm happy. Like you said yesterday, I asked him to come over to the right because I wanted to get the work. I just wanted to get his speed and feel that. And just having that ability to have a guy like that to practice against is huge.
All right, back to Stephen A. Smith. He has a little bit of a conspiracy theory about why Shedeur Sanders fell so far into the fifth round of the NFL draft.
The one thing that I do is work. Now, Adam Schefter and these are the ultimate insiders, and I defer to them. They will know. They've forgotten more than I know in terms of their sources, their contacts, whatever. But damn it, I have a few. And I talk to a lot of people in the world of sports, a lot of power brokers, a lot of people that are decision makers and whatever. I heard a lot about what was going on with Shedeur Sanders coming into the draft. And I will contest to you, I will proclaim to you on national television, that so much of what happened to Shedeur Sanders at draft day to drop to the 144th pick, a 5th rounder, when initially he was projected to be a top 2 or 3 quarterback taken in the draft, for all of that to happen to him, that was a slight, those were people that were hell-bent on making sure that Deion Sanders didn't get his way. And they went and they punished his son to punish him. Deion knows it. I know it. Anybody with sense know it. We've all heard it covering this league. And that had a lot to do with it. It was personal, and it wasn't some collusion that was going on. They didn't have to, because universally they felt, they watched the interviews, they saw the way Deion Sanders was speaking or whatever, and that's what broke his heart.
If there's any truth to that, I even more so than ever hope that Shedeur Sanders gets the opportunity to make those teams pay on the field. We'll see. We'll talk plenty of Browns. Lance Reisland, Fred Greetham, Spencer German coming up in just a few minutes on the show. But we're going to turn our attention to the Guardians. Guardians, game 2 of a 3-game set against the Rockies at Progressive Field. And the Guardians offense got it going early. First inning, Gabriel Arias hits one out into left field. It's a base hit. It will bring in 2 runs to give the Guardians an early 2-0 lead. They weren't done, though. Brian Rocchio, an RBI single in the second. That'll make it 3-0 Guardians with the lead. Third inning, Kyle Manzardo gets into the act. Manzardo, and this one isn't coming back. It's a home run out into right center. 5-0 Guardians with the lead. Still in the first, Brian Rocchio again. This one's off the wall, and Rocchio can run. This one's problems. A 2-run triple to make it 7-0 Guardians. As he slides in safely, ball gets away from the third baseman. Fourth inning, Nolan Jones, an RBI single to right to make it 8-1 Guardians. Guardians offense not done yet. Fifth inning, Stephen Kwan, an RBI single. 9-1 Guardians with the lead. Then in the sixth, Kyle Manzardo, yep, he did it again. Another home run to right center, 10-1. The Guardians with the lead. The Guardians go on to win it 10-4 to even up the series at a game apiece. 2 teams will play the third game of the series. Colby Aldred against Kyle Freeland, the pitching matchup. Multiple National Baseball reporters are saying that the Guardians are in talks, advanced talks, to trade Shane Bieber and potentially Stephen Kwan. Shane Bieber makes sense to me. He has a player option for his contract at $16 million with a $4 million buyout next year. So in fact, if he pitches well this year in the Guardians uniform and they don't trade him, he opts out, they get nothing. I could see where the Guardians would trade him. If they trade Stephen Kwan, who has a couple more years of team control on his contract, that tells you the Guardians are looking at a multiple-year rebuild where they do not think they will be competitive, because you don't do that with a leadoff hitter like Stephen Kwan, regardless of what you're going to get back in return relative to prospects, unless you're looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So we will monitor that closely. Time for us to take a quick timeout. Lance Reisland is up first. We're talking Browns and training camp. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day, put a little play in your day.
Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. An early morning practice out in Berea in full pads for the Browns. Players will have a day off tomorrow. Take a look. The quarterback's out and working. Joe Flacco finds Jerry Jeudy with a quick one that gets some yardage. Flacco, little crossing pattern to Jamari Thrash. Pretty nice catch. Shedeur Sanders getting some work with the number 2s. And a pretty good throw to Brendan Bates by Shedeur Sanders. Also, Dylan Gabriel getting some work in as well. Gabriel finds Hayden Davis, and Dylan Gabriel to Harold Fannin, the rookie tight end as well. Dylan Samson, the Browns running back, getting some work in, a pretty good run. As again, the Browns in pads with a lot of contact today. Players will get the day off tomorrow. Let's welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, you were out there. Something new for Kevin Stefanski. Team drills where they are full contact and tackling.
Yeah, they did some special teams drills where they kept the returners off the ground, but they did some kickoff return drills that were live. I started the practice down with the defensive linemen, who are incredibly impressive. Mason Graham is going to make everybody very happy. I would be shocked if he doesn't. But then the one-on-ones with the offensive line was very, very physical today. And then they had a couple different team sessions like they always do, situational stuff. But at the end, they went a number of plays where, besides the quarterbacks, everybody was live. And it was a pretty physical session. But you could also see the speed and tempo that you have to play with on Sundays or whatever day you're playing, whatever level of football. Because when it's live, it's just faster, even at that level. And I thought they did a good job. That play you showed of Samson, that was the first really good gap scheme where they're going to block down on one side, pull the guard and Fannin from the other side. They did that really well. That was probably one of their better runs inside. They've been struggling with the zone, but that gap scheme was a little bit easier for those offensive linemen. That was one of the better runs they had. But physicality-wise, the entire practice, from special teams to some of the team drills, they were very physical with each other, very smart. They didn't have to go, they weren't killing each other for an hour, but they did some nice live drills to get themselves ready. It was pretty impressive as a whole. Great energy, great tempo, great sense of urgency out there.
Do you remember practices with Kevin Stefanski where they tackled like that? I'm going back a couple of, I don't remember any under Kevin Stefanski where they had tackling to that level.
Well, this is my fourth year being down there at training camp, and I have never seen a all live drill like that where it was very team oriented, moving the ball, a lot of energy from all the coaches, a little bit of irritation from different players with other players, which is kind of what you want. Nothing drastic or illegal, just guys getting after it in the heat. On day 7 at 9 o'clock in the morning, I thought it was pretty impressive. But I'm with you. At least in my time of being down there, not only have I not seen a drill like that, but there was a purpose to that drill, and it was pretty impressive. And it started off with one-on-ones. That was pretty physical as well.
Yeah, and you and I've called for that. The way they've started, the injuries that they've had, and we talked a little bit earlier about Martin Emerson, and we know it is a torn Achilles. You're never going to avoid injuries, but I think you can minimize some of the injuries you had if you go at it like they're apparently going at it in training camp right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, in my experience, injuries happen in practice because a lot of times guys are going at different speeds because they're not sure what the speed they can go at. Now, you're absolutely right. Football is a game of injury. It's a collision sport. It's not a contact sport. But when you get in those live drills, a lot of times those are the most safe drills because everybody's playing fast. And when you play fast, and even in the NFL where they play fast, they do a nice job of not taking those cheap shots in practice or pounding on. Everybody's just doing their job. If you do your job at a high level, you can practice at full speed with the same issues that you would have at any other speed. Walkthrough. I've been down there a number of times where there's been injuries on walkthroughs and things like that. So I think it's something necessary. Once again, I don't think you have to go 25, 30 plays. 6, 8, 10, 12 plays of live, getting everybody a few reps. That really turns the corner in terms of being ready early in games and early in the season.
So DeJuan Jones left in the front seat of a cart. Have you heard any definitive information as to what was up with DeJuan? The reports were it didn't look serious.
Yeah, he pulled right by us, and I didn't even know he was anything was wrong with him. He looked okay. It turned out, the people I'm down there with, he just had heat issues. And again, it was really, really hot, and those offensive linemen are really, really working. And DeJuan Jones at left tackle now gets the tough task of trying to block Myles Garrett. And I'll tell you what, he did the best he can, and he fights so hard, and he's not going to face anybody better than Myles Garrett. And that's just the facts of it. So he works very hard. He's in great shape. The heat was just kind of stifling. And like I said, that intensity was kind of cranked up today. It was pretty good to see. There's some heat issues. They watered down, but that's all it was. big guy overheated from working hard, he'll be just fine.
So one of the veteran offensive linemen, Jack Conklin, talked about the offensive line's ability to kind of communicate with each other, returning to Kevin Stefanski's offense.
Definitely. No, just the sense of urgency, just the running the ball, the marriage and run pass stuff. That's what this group was brought in to do, and I'm just pumped that we're going back to that, and we're having a tough camp this year, and guys are fighting, and it's great to see.
Jack, you talked about that nonverbal communication.
Mm-hmm.
Mike mentioned a couple days ago that sometimes a grunt can mean a lot of different things. Just the development of that. How long and what's that process like to where just the grunt can mean no? You know instinctually what's going on.
I would say, strictly speaking for me and Wyatt, it took probably a few games into 2020, my first year here playing with him, and then just every year it's a little bit more. I can feel when he's there. I know that he's thinking the same things in the play that I'm thinking, and be able to have that bond with a guy, for 6 years like that is it's special, and it just takes our game to another level.
Lance, I know it's still early. Offensive line is going to be critical. What have you noticed from them? Are they taking steps to get back to where they need to be for this team to be successful?
There's absolutely no doubt. Bloomgren is doing a great job. Jack Conklin just said it best, right? When you go back to why these guys were brought in. So when you have to, when he says we're going to marry the run and pass game, that means a lot of pass protection comes off the run game. That means that defensive line has to work to stop the run first, and then react and get into a pass rush, which is a complete advantage to the offensive linemen. They struggled when they knew that the offense was going to pass, and it was just straight drop back with what they've had to do the last couple of years. So when they can marry that run and pass and they dictate what they're doing, and the run and pass is both available, the defensive line has to play. They can't pin their ear back, and they have to play honest, and they have to read their keys and stop their run first, etc. So yes, you saw it. And what I liked today was they have struggled a little bit with the double teams inside. And there's not a worse defense or a worse personnel to try to work on your double teams than the people they're going against the Browns, because Schwartz is such a gap scheme. So what they did today is they went to a little gap scheme where they're blocking down and pulling, like I said earlier, and that's kind of their answer. And the Stefanski run game is not only wide zone, it's not only gap, but it's answers to what the defense is doing. If the Browns were play a defense like themselves, it would be a lot more gap scheme because zone's hard to run. But they have an answer. And not only do they have an answer that Kevin Stefanski knows how to fix, which is very important.
All right. You've been at every training camp practice. What are your takeaways to this point? What have you seen? What are some of the things that that you like, some of the things that you think are a little bit concerning?
Well, the injury, first of all, the injury to Emerson is a big deal. He's a guy who's playing at a high level. He practiced at a high level, and he was really having a great camp. That means Newsome, first snap that happened, as I told you yesterday, Newsome went outside and Hickman went to the nickel. And then that guy could see Jenkins, a bunch of other guys, Edmonds, that are playing that free. Delpit's not practicing a bunch right now. I think he's just getting a little bit of rest last couple of days, but he'll be that guy down in the box. So that concerns me, that injury, just because of the way he's playing and kind of the leadership he brings. A couple things that are really, really, really exciting for the Browns, right, is that they're being really aggressive on both sides of the ball on the offensive defensive line, which gives you a chance to win. There's some guys that everybody expects is going to be good is really good. What I expected with Mason Graham when the pads went on is exactly what I'm seeing. He's starting to be really, really tough to block because of the fact he bends so well. That's the one thing I learned today is what an athlete he is. I didn't realize I knew he had leverage and balance and all those things as a former wrestler, but his ability to bend off the corner today was really impressive. Carson Schwarzenegger is an absolute tackling machine. He's been like that the first couple of days of pads. He's all over the place. He's so instinctual. So that's really, really promising. The receiver core, obviously you got Tillman and you got Judy, but then those guys behind, Floria, Thrash, Caden Davis, this Cage, Larvadan, he's having a pretty good camp. So interested to see those third, fourth, fifth receivers. But I think the most promising thing is just the energy and the attitude and the sense of urgency and the attention to detail that they're playing with, which is what you have to do. When you're 3-14, everybody thinks you're not very good. Your job is to prove them right or prove them wrong. And I think they're trying to prove everybody wrong, and they're doing a good job so far.
Before I let you go, there's some talk that Schwarzenegger might wear the green dot. That would be kind of the quarterback of the defense, making sure everybody is lined up and the calls get into him. Last year, I think there were 2 rookies in the entire league or the green dot. What are your perceptions of Schlesinger? Is he a guy you think that can handle that? We've heard him talk, seems sharp, but it seems like they might put that green dot on his helmet.
Well, I'm going to be really honest with you. Going back to when you and I doing the draft show together, he's a guy that I've now watched a ton of film on from UCLA, and now that you see him in person and how thick he's gotten since he's got to Cleveland, he has a chance to be a really, really, really high-level linebacker in this league. He's so instinctual. He's big. He's thick. He's great with his hands. He gets forward really quick, which Schwartz likes. And now what I think him, because he is an intellectual player as well, that allows these other linebackers to run free, right? And that, when this defense, those guys got to fly around and make plays. And that green dot guy's got to get everybody lined up, and then he has to fly around. But you got Baker and Diabate. These guys are really good-looking athletes that can now just play. I would be shocked if Schlesinger wasn't the green dot this fall. Really highly intellectual guy, but what a super athlete sideline to sideline. He made a ton of tackles today, which is really big for that defense.
Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate you joining us after Browns training camp. Thanks very much, Lance.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Cleveland.com. Always really good and insightful Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Lockdown Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. It's Tuesday. I'm watching the show. And Hasslam's up there, he got to talking about, domestic violence with the women. He knew damn well what Deshaun was up to before they went and did all that big nonsense, trading away 3 first-rounders and signing him to a mega deal, and he turned out to be a bust. So I don't want to hear his baloney about they did their due diligence. Let me know what you think, brother. Come on now. Love you, Dave. You and the family be good, be safe, and I'll be in touch. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, the Lockdown Browns podcast, and Cleveland Browns on SI. Spencer, I understand that perception. Each of them are individuals. You knew with Deshaun Watson. You had heard rumblings about Michael Hall. You heard rumblings about Perrion Winfrey. I guess the surprising thing is you didn't hear anything about Quinshon Judkins. It's almost like you can't win.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you're right about Quinshon. Like, nothing bad was said about him during the pre-draft process. There were really no red flags. I honestly think that caller, and I've talked about this a little bit, speaks for a lot of this fan base when it comes to these incidents, because I do believe that the Browns try to educate their players on how to avoid these situations. I'd love to see, I think de-escalation is maybe the biggest thing, right? Like, if you find yourself in this situation, how do you de-escalate and get out of it? I'm sure they try to teach some of those things. I've heard about some of the different speakers they've brought in to talk to players about these incidents. Some of them domestic violence victims who basically are saying, here's what happened to me. This is why this is important. And, so it's not that I don't think they're invested in it. And it's not that I don't think they try to educate their players. But I think where people get, where they lose people is in looking back and realizing what this team signed up for with the Deshaun Watson thing. The fact that he was accused of everything he was accused of, and then you kind of rewarded him in a way because you brought him in because you thought he was really good at football, and you gave him $230 million guaranteed, and it was I think that really turned a lot of people off to, yeah, you might invest in these things, you might invest in the education piece, you might try to educate players, on, how not to get in these situations and how to get on the straight and narrow for guys who maybe do come in with those red flags. But the problem is it keeps happening. And the more it happens, the more people just go back to the Deshaun thing and say, why am I not surprised that this organization has people that are doing these things? So, yeah, listen, I think that, like, and here's the thing, like, it's not like this isn't a league-wide problem. Like, there's people getting arrested for similar things across the league. There's numbers that show that. The Browns aren't abnormal in that way. But the problem is when you have the Deshaun Watson situation looming overhead for this organization, I think it becomes like they become the easy target for all this. And so they kind of have to figure this thing out. I thought it was interesting that Jimmy Haslam said, we have to rethink how we do some of this stuff because, maybe it's not getting through. Like we're teaching it, but we need to find ways to make sure it's resonating with the players. And so we'll see what changes, if anything changes. This will always be happening in football, but the Browns are sort of the easy target and the punching bag, if you will, because when you sign up for what you signed up for with Deshaun Watson, no one's going to really care what you have to say about how much you try to teach players to do the right thing.
Yeah, without question. The skepticism, I get it. All right, let's move on. Martin Emerson out for the year. How did the Browns handle the secondary without him? And now, Greg Newsome, you have your opportunity to earn a lot of money, young man.
Yeah, I love that you start with that because we know Greg's been talking for years, especially on Twitter and whatnot, about getting the opportunity to play outside and how that's where he thinks he can play that spot and he thinks he can thrive in that spot. And let's face it, that's where money is made as a corner, as an outside guy. And so he's going to get his chance to do that. He's going to get his chance to prove that he can play out there as an outside corner in a contract year nonetheless. So yes, he could be in line for a major payday. I do think, well, first of all, I do think it's worth saying, like, I feel terrible for Martin because, because he talked to us earlier in the day out there in Maria yesterday and made it very clear how he talked about how excited he was to, just put last year behind him, a year that he felt like wasn't up to his standard, and try to put something better out there this year in a contract year himself. And you could tell he was really embracing that, really looking forward to that. And so to see him go down with this so early on in camp especially is brutal. I feel for him. But the Browns, obviously, they can't sit there and cry about it. They have to go out and keep moving forward with knowing there's a season to play, and that's just kind of the life cycle of football. So, yeah, like after he was out yesterday, I know, and I think Lance Reisland, who you just had on, talked about this. Like it was Ronnie Hickman who was kind of up first in that slot spot as they ran three safeties. And then later on, you saw them run like some dime, and it was Cameron Mitchell and Ronnie Hickman. And I think that was similar today where you saw a lot of Cameron Mitchell and then the three safety look. And I honestly think that's how they kind of fill that slot void, that nickel corner void. If they're moving Greg Newsome outside like we're all anticipating, I think it becomes kind of like a by committee thing where sometimes you're going to bring a safety down. Sometimes you're going to use Cameron Mitchell. Sometimes it'll be a little bit of both. So that's kind of my guess on how they handle that. But what I think is interesting too is with Martin Emerson Jr. Suffering this injury, it means there's now a roster spot available, right? Like for maybe another corner that maybe didn't know if he was going to make the team, or perhaps you keep five safeties if you're going to do more of the three safety looks. So we'll see how they handle that when we get to roster cutdown day. But yeah, certainly an opportunity created here with the unfortunate injury to Martin Emerson Jr.
So you wrote an article about reshaping the defensive line in 2025. What have your thoughts been? Take us through that article.
Yeah, listen, I think this defensive line is, I don't want to say they're not being talked about enough, because I think at least locally people understand that group has a chance to really be special. But it is the strength of the team, and I think maybe if I'm pinpointing one person, I don't know if enough was said about the fact that Malik Collins is, a guy that was dominant last year for San Francisco. I think he was top 10 in pass rush win rate, according to some of the advanced metrics out there from the interior of a defense last year. So like with him, with Mason Graham, who, yeah, we're forecasting a little bit that he's going to be a dominant player. But when you take somebody number 5 overall, I think you do sort of assume they're going to be a dominant player. And then I've seen a lot of good stuff from both Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright throughout camp, where they're constantly in the backfield, they're constantly causing problems. They each would have a couple of sacks by now. If they kept those at training camp, obviously they sort of back off and let the quarterback do his thing because they don't want to ruin the play completely, so they get a good rep and they can't hit the quarterback. But yeah, like I think both those guys have looked really good, and they're sort of going to they'll be obviously rotating there. We've seen Shelby Harris make a couple plays, including a couple sacks. I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has flashed in some spots. So I just think this group is really deep. The fact that they've kind of embraced this Jim Schwartz aggressive style of play, they're more attacking now. It's not going to be, I think when they brought in Dalvin Tomlinson, it was more about like, can we get a space eating guy in the middle of the defense? Now I think they're more leaning into, hey, let's attack every single snap and see if we can get after the quarterback and cause problems. And I think they have the right guys here to do that, including Mason, who played in more of like a read and react style at Michigan, but was constantly in the backfield even doing that because he was so good. So I'm excited for this group. I think Miles, we've paid so much attention over the years to who's opposite of Miles. I think the fact that he's next to, he's going to move around like he always does, but the fact that he's going to line up especially next to Mason Graham, who can do who can maybe draw some attention of his own and free Miles to do some things. I think the sky is absolutely the limit for this group. I think the defense goes as that group goes, and as the defense goes, I think that's going to sort of be the thing that this team falls back on to keep them in games, because I do think the offense, while it will be better than next year, is probably still going to struggle at times to produce points, and so they're going to need that defense to sort of keep things close.
Spencer German and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about quarterback. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You got so much to do. It's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day. 'Cause it's fun all over the state. So come on. Great games wait for you and me. The Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Locked On Browns podcast. Jimmy Hasslam, Browns owner, yesterday talked about the pick of Shedeur Sanders in the draft and how it was Andrew Berry's pick, not his. Louis Riddick, former front office type on ESPN's NFL First Take, talked about hearing that information and about how the Browns arrived at drafting Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round.
In my opinion, they're saying that because he's sitting there saying, look, they didn't really have him ranked that high. They didn't think they were going to draft. I don't know who ultimately pulls the trigger on this. Here's the bigger issue. I don't even really care why he said what he said. This is what it tells me, though. What it tells me is that this young man is ice skating uphill. That's what it tells me. Because they are not in lockstep as far as how they view him within that organization. Why else would you come out and say, as I was driving home on Friday night, if you would have told me we were going to draft Shedeur Sanders on Saturday, I would have said, that ain't happening. What that means is there's enough people at the top of the totem pole who are like, nah, he's not for us. Simple as that. And then he went on to say, we had the right people in the room. We had a meeting about it Saturday, and we had the right people in the room, and ultimately Andrew picked the player. I mean, what the hell?
Why are you saying that right now? He's
exactly.
on
Spencer, again, that isn't what I heard when I heard Jimmy Hasslam say that. He basically was saying, I did not tell Andrew Berry to take Shedeur Sanders, like the entire world of national media is telling him. What did you think about the comments he made about the quarterback situation?
There's actually more I want to elaborate on with in terms of what he said about the quarterback position beyond just the Shedeur thing. But I don't know. I found that clip just kind of weird in general. Just because I don't know. Like I'm with you, Dave. Like I think Jimmy Hasslam has a certain reputation around the league, and so people and owners just do in general. So they become easy punching bags for people, and I think it's easy to be like, well, why would you say this now? He said it now because he was asked a question about it, and because he was trying to clarify. There was an initial belief back then that he was the one who said draft Shedeur Sanders. And so I think he was trying to get on the record like, no, it wasn't me. I let my guys do their work themselves. And I think that's the most important thing that should have been sort of taken away from that conversation, was that he let Andrew Berry make that decision. It wasn't something that he forced upon him. Because here's the other thing. If he had forced it upon him, like, I think Louis Riddick would be on First Take saying the exact same thing. Like, well, hey, if the owner's the only one who wanted him, then we know people in that organization aren't actually pulling for Shedeur. Like, it would have just been, no matter what, that he was going to get criticized. I think it's a little ridiculous that that's the takeaway from this, because, like, I get what he's saying, I guess, but I think ultimately the value just ended up being there, and they were like, let's pull the trigger. Andrew Berry even said the weekend of the draft that he didn't necessarily know they were going to come away with 2 quarterbacks, and they didn't know they were going to come away with Shedeur Sanders. But by the time he got to the 5th round, he was still there. The value was just too good to pass up, and so they did it. And like, you could say that same thing if he had gotten drafted by any other team. You could have said the same exact thing, because that Louis Riddick is saying, because clearly all these teams were like, well, we don't necessarily feel great about him as an organization, so we're going to keep waiting, and then eventually somebody else would have taken him. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a silly statement. I actually thought, like, what Jimmy Haslam said in relation to the quarterback conversation, or their quarterback conundrum in general, and moving forward, and like finding that answer was even more interesting than what he said about not making the Shedeur pick. And what I mean by that is, he alluded to multiple times, like, this idea of patience, right? Like, this was going to take time to rebuild. It was going to take time to find this quarterback. At one point, he put like a 2 to 3 year time frame on the concept of finding that quarterback. And I think, like, it's twofold. I think that again sort of reiterates that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are going to have time here to get this thing back on the tracks and find their eventual franchise quarterback that they'll be tied to. Which that's not news to us, because we've been talking about that for a while. But because he basically doubled down on what he said at the owners' meetings back in March. But then also it kind of suggests that, yeah, they don't really know that either quarterback in this room right now of the rookies, or even Kenny Pickett to a degree, are their future, and that they're keeping an open mind about it, but that they have positioned themselves. And Jimmy also mentioned, like, continuing to prioritize accumulating draft picks for next year. So all that sort of points to me, or says to me, is, hey, we don't necessarily think we have that quarterback in this room right now. So we'll have to see how things go, and that they have, all eyes on 2026 to potentially find that guy. And, this is an interesting quarterback class coming out next year, so it's kind of easy to get infatuated with the names that are out there. But I found that kind of interesting, because while all of us kind of debate, should Shedeur be the starter? Should Dillon be the starter? Is one of these guys the future of the franchise? It kind of seems like the organization is already thinking about 2026 as the place where they'll actually find a quarterback.
Before I let you go, what have you've been out at training camp quite a bit. What have you seen relative to the quarterbacks? How do you think this quarterback thing lays out?
Yeah, I still think Flacco is the front runner for obvious reasons. He knows the offense. He's like, he gets in there, and you don't really have a lot to like report about as people watching as in the media on the sidelines. Like, he's kind of just steady. There's some good throws, there's some bad throws. It's just what you kind of expect from Joe Flacco at this point. But when you line up in between those white lines, he's going to run the offense effectively, or you at least feel confident that he can, and that he's going to be able to operate things the way that they need to be operated, and try to put some points on the board in a pretty proficient way. So I feel good about that. Kenny Pickett, I think we know the organization really likes him and wants him to probably be the guy, I would think. But at the same time, the injury obviously sets him back a little bit here. We know that. I thought he was kind of up and down throughout the days of camp that he had practiced in the first 4 days there. He ended, I think, that Saturday practice with maybe his best day. And then obviously the injury, like I said, is going to kind of hold him back here for a little bit. And I'm interested to see now, with these added opportunities, especially these last 3 days, I think Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel both have kind of tried to embrace the extra reps that they've been getting and tried to make the most of it. I thought Dillon on Tuesday had one of his, it was probably, to me, I know he threw an interception late in the practice, but I thought from like a standpoint of the throws he was making and the timing on things, he had maybe his best day of camp. I thought he looked really good. I thought Shedeur had a little bit of a rougher practice on Tuesday, but I also think like there's been some ups and downs with him, and I think he's always responded pretty well to some of the downs, if you will, where he's come back the next day and looked really good. I know on Wednesday I missed practice today because I was at home for a sick child, but I know I saw he actually got to go against the first team defense today, so that's an exciting thing, which we've been waiting to sort of see. And I hope he gets more of that, because I think ultimately to judge both those rookies on some level on like the same playing field, we got to see them both go against the ones. And Dylan's got plenty of those reps, but Shador hasn't. And then frankly, like, I think the place where Shador really has a chance to shine is going to be in the preseason, where he's going to get a ton of reps. And if he puts on a show, he may make it harder for the coaching staff to not give him more of the reps that we're talking about with the first team as we get later and later into camp. But right now, I would still say Joe Flacco is kind of just like your sure plan if you need it. And I think that's the guy that they probably lean towards right now. But there's still time. We'll see how it all shakes out. We'll see if one of these rookies really impresses, or if Kenny Pickett gets back in time to sort of steal the job back.
Spencer German, appreciate you making some time for us. Thanks so much. Really good stuff as always. Thanks, Spencer.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me. We'll talk again soon.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out. 92.3 The Fan. Also, Cleveland Browns on SI and the Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, you've been out at camp every day, including earlier today. I know you wrote an article about Dylan Samson and his ability to kind of be the guy and carry the load in his first year. Take us through that and kind of your thoughts as you've watched him perform a little bit with the pads on.
Well, I think, a lot of eyes are on him because maybe no fault of his own, but just the whole thing that happened with Judkins and Jerome Ford missing the first 4 days. It was pretty much him and Pierre Strong. Now Ford is back, but when you take a guy in the 4th round, you think that he can contribute, especially the way running backs today. Not many get drafted in the 1st round. Most are taken, lower in the draft. The Browns, went out and got Quinshon Judkins with a 36th pick in the draft, which tells you they expected him to be the starting running back and to carry the load. And then you moved on from Nick Chubb. So with Dylan Samson, I think that he's thrown into the spotlight because everybody knows what Jerome Ford has, and the Browns are really looking to, get a big lift in their running game, and they were expecting that from Judkins. We don't know. Assume that he's going to be out for some time. The owner yesterday, Jimmy Hasslam, said he was cautiously optimistic, or said that he thought that he would, play for the Browns. But we don't know because the legal system doesn't always move that quickly. And they don't move it at the pace of the NFL or the schedule. So with that being said, I think the Browns want to focus on the running game. They know what they have with Jerome Ford, but you're hoping Dylan Samson can provide that spark or be, maybe that impetus. Very young. He's only 20 years old. He won't turn 21 till September once the season started. So I asked him if we talked to him about having pressure, feeling pressure. He said, no, he just takes things day by day. That, we have that in the story. But he's very accomplished if you look at him. The SEC, the last I knew, was known as a pretty good football conference. He was the Offensive Player of the Year in the SEC last year. He rushed for over 1,400 yards. He had 22 touchdowns. And you talk about being the workhorse. He had 258 carries, which led the SEC. All three of those stats I just gave you were the best or the most in the SEC. So he has shown he can do it. He's a little undersized, 5'8", 200 pounds, what they have him listed at. But the way the Browns rotate backs, I mean, I argued a lot when they had Nick Chubb. You know, they didn't feel like they used him a lot, 15 carries maybe a game. You know, so I think you can get Samson some good use out there and in the passing game as well. But yeah, we'll have to see. Kind of anxious to see him when they get going in the first couple preseason games because I think a lot of focus will be on him.
Globally, what are some of your takeaways from training camp so far? You've been doing it. You've been out at a number of training camps. What have you thought? Just what you've seen so far?
Yeah, it's unlike a lot of them because you know the 4 quarterbacks. Now it's actually been a little easier to keep track of that the last couple days with Kenny Pickett not out there, but they were on 2 different fields, 2 quarterbacks, doing a lot of reps to try to get them all work. So I think that's going to be streamlined now more and more, even with the injury. But I think clearly in the quarterback front, I think Joe Flacco still, you know, is shoulders above, not just in height, but ahead of everybody else, and you'd kind of expect that. But I like what I saw Dylan Gabriel today. I thought he has started to really come on. He's very bright. You know, obviously he's short, but he threw a nice pass downfield to Caden Davis, right between 2 defenders for a touchdown today. He had one to Gage Lavardane in tackling drills, something we hadn't seen under Kevin Stefanski before. It was a shorter route on the sideline, but the tacklers couldn't get Lavardane down, and he scored a touchdown. Caden Davis had a big day. I've seen some things out of Deontay Johnson. So there's some guys that we were wondering about that are showing up, and there's some guys we didn't really know much about. I've been very impressed with Carson Schlesinger. You know, I seen him knock Samson down the other day with basically a shiver. And, you know, and we talked to him today about that, and he just seems like a football player, you know, just, you know, like kind of the old throwback type guy. And so I think it's going to boil down to the quarterbacks and what they do and how they play. But the receivers, you know, they had a little scare with Tillman, but he's looked pretty good. He's been out there. Deontay Johnson has looked pretty well, and I've seen some things from Thrash. Of course, they waived Michael Woods today. He'd missed 5 days of practice, and when you got a lot of wide receivers, you can't do that. So, yeah, there's still a long way to go, but 7 practices in the book. I think next week I'm going down to Carolina to see the practices and the preseason game. That's when things will start to separate, especially if Kenny Pickett's not ready to go. I think Flacco it'd be hard to get him ready to start if he's not practicing, you know, even next week against the Panthers.
So relative to the 2 rookie quarterbacks, you've got part of this fan base that Shedeur Sanders can do no wrong, and then there's probably a smaller one where Shedeur Sanders can do no right. I guess what I'm saying is there anything that you've seen that would sway you either one way or another? It seems like if you're predisposed to like Shedeur Sanders, you still like him. If you were predisposed to like Dylan Gabriel, you still like him. What have you seen from the 2 rookies?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen growth. They've thrown Gabriel in there getting first team reps. And like I said, I thought he had one of his best days today. I think there's a lot to like about him. I mean, I know the height, but he's been able to adapt it. We'll see, you know, once they get going. Sanders, I can see some of the flaws in his game that they were talking about. But he's very accurate. It's just he's got to get rid of the ball a little quicker. He hasn't played with the first team. He's played with more of the second and third team. But today, for the first time in 11 on 11s, he was with the second and third team offense, but he was going up against Myles Garrett and the number 1 defense. And he completed 2 of 3, even though they were pretty much just real short checkdowns. I think he's learning to get rid of the ball, and that's something maybe he could get away with in college, but I don't know if you can in the NFL, is hanging on the ball. I think yesterday in the final series, the 7-on-7 goal line, they were trying to move the ball in the 2-minute or 30-second drill, and on the last play, he took a sack to end the practice. So, I mean, I'm anxious also to see him in that first preseason game or the first two. I think Gabriel and Sanders will play quite a bit, especially if Pickett doesn't play, because I don't expect Flacco really to play much. So, I think the future can be bright with these two guys. I think that they realized they didn't draft him second overall, so that tells you they weren't expecting either of them to step on the field day one. I don't see why there would be any thing wrong with them learning. We know, watching the Browns, they went through 4 starting quarterbacks last year, went through 5 the year before. Not saying that's what they expect, but even the owner said that he in his talk with us yesterday, he said that Kevin knows how important it is to see what they have in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And so I fully expect they'll play at some point this year. So I think, as I've said many times on this show and other shows, is that the first 6 games is a gauntlet. I would think you would go with your veteran, and then if you don't come out of those 6 games kind of in a position to keep playing, you got plenty of season left to see what you have with the young guys.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me. The Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm just happen to be listening to the NFL Network, and they're talking about who the Browns are with this same owner, same old general manager, same old coach, and basically they're going nowhere. No definite plan to even try to win. Okay, I was wondering what your guys' opinion is on that. And don't tell me, Dave, they should not have drafted Mayfield. Take care, guys. Heading into a season with things hanging off us. Oh, well. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, I think the question becomes twofold. Not only who made the trade for Watson, but who guaranteed the $230 million? The draft picks are allocated as kind of where you're at relative to, top end of the roster relative to young talent, because you don't have those 3 first-round picks. When they made the trade, I liked it. You were swinging big. But what happens when you swing and miss is you then are in a period where you kind of are where the Browns are right now. I don't think the roster is as bad as some of the national people are making it. I also can't tell you I think it's a playoff roster right now. And it still wasn't by the way, it was a mistake to take Baker Mayfield over Josh Allen. But I digress.
Yeah, I mean, it's always as far as Baker, he wasn't the choice I had, but I thought, he was a starting NFL quarterback above average. I don't think he would have accomplished what he's done, if he would have stayed here. But I think he needed that, and that's like many times, guys, it clicks, kind of with the chip on the shoulder. With that said, the Watson thing, I thought it was everybody knows to be in this division with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, in whatever the Steelers, had Ben Roethlisberger, I think at the time, or close to it. You have to have, even in the AFC, the Mahomes and all the other quarterbacks, Josh Allen, you had to have an elite quarterback to compete to go to the Super Bowl. And the last time Watson played, he was an elite quarterback. He led the NFL in passing yardage, over 4,800 yards. Yeah, you had to give up a lot, but you thought you were going to be going to the playoffs every year and drafting in the 30s or 28 to 32 wasn't going to be, that big of a deal. As Hasslam said yesterday, it has left a big hole in the roster because not only the 3 first rounders should be contributors, there was other higher picks, second round picks. There should have been 4 or 5, 6 players that are starting for you now that you don't have. So you're playing catch up through the draft. Yeah, I mean, as far as that's why the quarterback makes things go. That's why they took 2 quarterbacks, even if neither of these guys are the answer. They're trying to turn over as many stones to find one because they know ultimately they need to get that quarterback. And, as much as I like Travis Hunter, that's why they made that trade with the idea if they don't have a quarterback this time, then maybe next year with those 2 picks, and maybe Jacksonville will have a high pick, and maybe you wouldn't have to use your own pick on a quarterback. Maybe you could use Jacksonville's pick. So, a lot be determined, but it's one of those things that you're in. You got to get a quarterback. You think you had one with Watson, turned out to be a big miss, and it set your organization back. And so when Hasslam was talking, all along they said they intend to win. You could tell he was saying that they're going to be patient. He expects more than 3 wins, but that's not a high bar. So I think that they realize they're all in this together. They made the decision. I think Andrew Berry brought it to the owners. They didn't have a lot of time to make the decision because Watson already turned them down once. And they went to the owner and he goes, "Yep, I'll sign off on it." And that's how that went down. Same way I think with the drafting of Shedeur Sanders is what he said yesterday. He didn't make the decision. So all things totaled, they're still trying to transition. They're trying to win, but they're trying this year, I think, is see what you have in the young guys, not only quarterback, but a lot of positions, especially when you just lost Martin Emerson. You look at it, Dave, 3 of their key starters on defense were lost before the season even started. Jordan Hicks retired a week ago, and we know JOK was declared out for the season. So that's 3 big holes in that defense before you even get started.
Yep, and I guess the cautionary tale is when you swing big with a trade, there's a downside, and now you're in the downside. The other thing, and kind of along those same lines, ESPN Unsportsmanlike had the Browns as the 4th worst roster in the NFL. Evan Cohn, one of the guys from Unsportsmanlike, talked about some of the Browns' moves this offseason.
I think the Cleveland Browns have actually done so many things that if they were wearing a different uniform, we'd consider it really smart. Think about this for a second. You have the owner of a team saying, "I'm not a football person anymore," because I do believe that he made the Deshaun Watson decision, and thus I'm going to allow for the general manager and the coach to make decisions because they're football people. In addition, I think there are smart moves. They doubled down on Myles Garrett. That's smart. Double down by way of money, as well as we're going to bring in Mason Graham to play next to you from Michigan, who's only going to help you. They doubled down.
So you thought that was the right move?
Here we go. Here's why. They doubled down on Myles Garrett 2 ways. They doubled down on next year's draft, which is a quarterback draft, by getting their pick and the Jaguars' pick. They doubled down on the idea of doubling their chances of finding a diamond in the rough with 2 mid-round quarterbacks. One of them who slipped there in Shedeur Sanders, the other Dylan Gabriel. I think if the Cleveland Browns were wearing a different uniform and we had no preconceived negative notions about them, we would actually look at a lot of their decisions as intelligent this offseason.
you know, Fred, the thing that set all that up was they were the fourth worst roster. The Dolphins were above them, and then they went with 3 others that were worse than them. I think they're closer to the middle of the road. And I think what people are basing it on is the offensive line. They're all 30. Some of them may show signs of age. I think some of them are going to actually rebound and play pretty well. And if you have strong offensive line, and I think their defensive line is going to be elite, you can win some games in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it several times, is that those first 7 games last year, they had horrific quarterback play, and they were 1-6, and the season was over. They would have just scored, 20 points in all those games. They would have won 3 or 4, and instead of the season being over, they could have made a run. But I think everybody knew that when the season was over, when you're 1-6, and the defense played very well that first 7 games, but then it started to fall off with attrition. So I do think that the start matters, but I do think that the team's not as good as they were 11-6, but not as bad as 3-14. I kind of tend to agree with you that I see them more in the middle of the pack. I think the defense can really be good if they can withstand, like I just talked about, the injuries. They can't withstand too many injuries, but that defensive line should be much better. I mean, I'm seeing Kevin Stefanski talk today that they can't even practice because when Garrett's out there, because he gets a sack on every play, and he gets upset when Stefanski doesn't call sack and lets the play keep going. But Mason Graham, is penetrating this Carson Schlesinger. He's all over the field. I think that they can have a really good defense, and that can keep them in games. The problem last year was when they were keeping them in the games, the offense never did anything, and they lost, 6 of their first 7, and it kind of set the tone. Season was over.
All right, before I let you go, what are a couple of things you're keeping your eye on as we move forward in training camp the next couple of days? I know tomorrow's a day off, but what do you want to see? What do you think is important as you move into those joint practices?
Well, you want to get some outside the quarterback. You want to get that into a rhythm, get somebody going, get rhythm to get started for the season. But I still want to see the wide receivers. I've seen some good plays by Deontay Johnson, Cedric Tillman. They must feel good about some of the younger guys because they let Michael Woods go. He was a draft pick. So I want to see more of the receivers and obviously the quarterback play, but how this running back situation's going to play out with Samson, Strong, and Ford. I think the offensive line's going to be pretty good. I mean, DeJuan Jones, is getting work every day with Myles Garrett. There's not many in the league that are better than Garrett, and so if he can hold his own anyway, that will only help him for the games. Defense, I like Schlesinger, want to see more of him, anxious to see him as the season. But the secondary, now we're counting on Emerson to be either your 2 or 3, and now you got to go a little deeper. We always felt the depth was a little shy in the secondary. Hickman's been back there, but they're using Edmonds, they're using Kazee. He likes to use 3 safeties, so the secondary is what I'm going to watch on defense, see how that shakes out.
Fred Greetham, Senior Analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Appreciate you taking some time with us after training camp today. Thanks very much, Fred. Appreciate it, man.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. He is the Senior Analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Always a great Browns coverage. Make sure you check him out. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.